I found out my best friend was living a double life, and I can't look at her the same. I've known Lauren since we were kids. We grew up on the same street, went to the same schools, shared secrets, and basically did everything together. She was the closest thing I had to a sister. I thought I knew everything about her. Her favorite foods, her pet peeves, the way she nervously twirled her hair when she was anxious. We even talked about our futures all the time. You know, the big life stuff like marriage, careers, where we'd live. It never occurred to me that Lauren had a side to her I would never see coming. We had one of those friendships where we could spend hours together and never run out of things to say. But about a year ago, she started acting different. At first, I chalked it up to work stress. We were both pushing 30, and our careers were really taking off. But after a few months, I began to feel like she was pulling away from me. We still hung out, but it felt like there was this wall between us, like she was holding something back. I tried to ignore it. I didn't want to be that clingy friend who needed reassurance. But it was hard. She'd cancel plans last minute, and sometimes she'd ghost me for days, only to pop back up like nothing happened. I didn't want to pry, but I missed my best friend, and I had no idea what was going on with her. Whenever I asked, she'd wave it off, saying everything was fine and I was overthinking things. I almost believed her. Until one night everything changed. We were supposed to meet for dinner, just like old times. Nothing fancy, just the two of us catching up over wine and pizza at our favorite spot. I hadn't heard from her all day, so I shot her a text to make sure she was still coming. She didn't respond. After an hour of waiting, I texted her again. Still nothing. That's when I started to worry. I called her, but it went straight to voicemail. I know I should have just let it go, assumed she was busy and would explain later. But something about the whole situation felt off. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. So I did something I'm not proud of. I decided to drive to her apartment to check on her. I know, it sounds crazy, but I was worried. And besides, it wasn't like she lived far. It would take me 20 minutes at most. When I got there, her car was parked outside, but the lights were off. I knocked on the door. Nothing. I knocked again, harder this time. Still nothing. That's when I tried calling her again. As soon as I hit dial, I heard a phone buzzing inside. I don't know what came over me, but I panicked. My mind started racing with horrible thoughts. What if she was hurt? What if something had happened to her? I tried the door, and to my surprise, it was unlocked. I called out her name as I stepped inside, but no answer. The place was eerily quiet, and my heart was pounding in my chest. As I made my way through the living room, I spotted something strange, a pair of men's shoes by the door. That was odd because Lauren wasn't seeing anyone. At least, not that she had told me. I pushed the thought aside, convincing myself there had to be some explanation. Maybe a friend had come over. Maybe I was overreacting. But then I heard voices coming from the bedroom. My stomach dropped. I walked towards the hallway, and the closer I got, the more I could make out. It was Lauren, and a man. My brain was trying to process what was happening, but I couldn't make sense of it. I felt like I was in some kind of alternate reality. Who was this guy? Why hadn't she told me about him? And why was she acting like she had something to hide? Before I could decide what to do next, the door opened, and Lauren came face to face with me. The look on her face said it all. She wasn't just surprised to see me. She was terrified. It was like she had been caught in the middle of something she didn't want me to know about. The guy behind her was older, probably in his 40s, maybe even early 50s, and there was something off about him. He had this slick, polished look, like someone who was used to being in control. He gave me a quick, sharp glance, then turned back to Lauren almost like he was waiting for her to explain. "Rachel, what are you doing here?" Lauren asked, her voice shaky. "I could ask you the same thing," I shot back, trying to keep my cool. "You didn't show up for dinner, you didn't answer my calls, and now this?" She pulled me aside away from the guy and whispered, "You need to leave." "Leave?" I hissed. "Lauren, what's going on? Who is he?" She looked like she was about to cry, but she kept her voice low, glancing nervously at the man in the background. "I can't explain right now. Please, just go." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was my best friend, the person I trusted more than anyone, and she was acting like I was the one doing something wrong. I wanted to demand answers, to scream at her for hiding whatever this was from me, but something in her eyes told me not to push it. So, without another word, I turned and left. For days after that, I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. I tried texting Lauren, but she didn't respond. I wanted to believe it was some misunderstanding, that there was a perfectly logical explanation, but deep down, I knew that wasn't true. There was something bigger going on, something she wasn't telling me, and it scared me. Eventually, she reached out. She apologized for how things went down, but still wouldn't give me any details. She just said she was involved with someone and it was complicated. That was it. No further explanation, no clearing the air, just vague answers that left me more confused than ever. It was like a part of her life had suddenly become off-limits to me, and I didn't know how to feel about that. I wanted to be understanding, to respect her privacy, but it hurt. It felt like she had become a stranger overnight, and I didn't know how to be her friend anymore. The last time we spoke, she told me she was moving. Not far, just to a different part of town, but it felt like she was pulling away for good. I didn't push her. I didn't ask any more questions. I just said, okay. But the truth is I miss her. And I miss the friendship we had. But now I'm not sure if I ever really knew her at all. TLDR, my best friend of 20 years started acting distant, so I went to check on her when she ghosted me for dinner. I found her with an older man she never mentioned, and she refused to explain. Now, it feels like she's hiding a whole part of her life from me, and our friendship hasn't been the same since. Update: I found out my best friend was living a double life, and I can't look at her the same. Hey everyone! I didn't expect so many of you to relate to or be invested in my story, but reading through the comments has really helped me process everything. I appreciate all the advice and support, even from the people who called me out on my mistakes. I needed to hear that too. A lot of you suggested I confront Lauren and demand the truth, or even walk away from the friendship altogether, but things have taken another turn. Here's what happened. After a few weeks of radio silence from Lauren, she reached out. It was a late text just after midnight. It said, "Can we talk?" I stared at the screen for a good minute, debating whether to respond. My feelings were still all over the place. Anger, confusion, hurt, but at the same time I missed her. So I replied with a simple, sure. The next day, we met up at this little cafe we used to go to all the time, back before everything started falling apart. The moment I saw her, I knew she'd been going through something heavy. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept in days. I could tell this wasn't going to be a simple conversation. She sat down and immediately started apologizing profusely. I could see the guilt all over her face. She told me she'd been avoiding me because she didn't know how to explain what had been happening in her life. And then she said something that completely blindsided me. She had been having an affair. Not just any affair. She was involved with her boss, the man I saw in her apartment that night. He was older, married, and had kids. Lauren had been living this secret life for over a year, and I had no clue. She said it started out as a harmless flirtation, something she thought would never go anywhere. But before she knew it, things spiraled out of control, and she found herself in a full-blown relationship with him. I just sat there in shock as she told me everything. She said she hated herself for what she was doing, but she was too deep in to walk away. The worst part was, she confessed that she had fallen in love with him. I could see the pain in her eyes as she admitted that, and it broke my heart. I didn't know what to say. I mean, how do you respond to something like that? This was my best friend, the person I had trusted with everything, and now I was sitting across from her, learning she had been lying to me for over a year. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to yell at her for making such a terrible choice, for betraying herself and the people she loved. But all I could feel was sadness. I asked her why she hadn't told me sooner. Her answer was complicated. She said she was ashamed, that she knew what she was doing was wrong, but she didn't know how to stop. She was afraid of losing everything. Her job, her reputation, and yes, even me. That's why she kept me in the dark. The guilt was eating her alive, but the fear of being judged and abandoned was stronger. I listened as she spilled everything out. How her boss had promised he'd leave his wife but kept delaying it. How their relationship was a constant push and pull, with her always waiting for him to make a choice. She said she knew it was toxic, but part of her believed that he really would choose her in the end. And then she dropped the final bombshell. She was pregnant. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She hadn't told him yet, and she wasn't sure if she even would. She was terrified of what this would mean for her life, his marriage, and the fallout that would follow. In that moment, I saw just how lost and scared she was, and all the anger I had melted away. It wasn't that I forgave her for everything, how could I? But I understood why she had been acting the way she had. I was quiet for a long time, just trying to absorb everything. Lauren looked at me, waiting for me to say something, anything. I didn't know where to start. Finally, I asked her what she wanted to do. She shook her head, tears in her eyes, and said she had no idea. She felt trapped in a relationship she knew was wrong, trapped by the pregnancy, trapped by the lies she had been telling herself and everyone else. I wanted to help her, but I wasn't sure how. I didn't even know if I could. Part of me was still hurt, still struggling to process the fact that she had kept this huge part of her life from me. But another part of me felt like I couldn't just abandon her when she needed me the most. We sat in that cafe for hours, talking, crying, going over everything. By the time we left, I knew our friendship would never be the same, but I also knew I couldn't walk away. Not yet, at least. I told her I'd be there for her, but I also made it clear that she needed to figure out what she wanted, not just for herself but for the baby too. She couldn't keep living this lie. I wish I could say everything was magically resolved after that conversation, but it wasn't. Lauren is still in a mess, and I'm still trying to figure out where I fit into all of this. She's planning to tell the guy about the pregnancy soon, but I have no idea how that's going to play out. If I'm being honest, I'm scared for her. So that's where things stand now. I still don't know what the future holds for us, or for her. Our friendship has been shaken to its core, and I'm not sure if it'll ever go back to the way it was. But I'm trying to support her, even though part of me feels like I'm supporting someone I don't fully know anymore. I guess the truth is, sometimes the people you think you know the best are the ones hiding the most. And now I'm just trying to figure out how to move forward one step at a time. TLDR, my best friend finally opened up and confessed she's been having an affair with her married boss for over a year. She's fallen in love with him, but things are toxic, and now she's pregnant. Our friendship will never be the same, but I'm trying to support her as she navigates this huge mess. It's complicated, and I don't know where we go from here.